I have never seen the excuse making at this point, and it's kind of funny because they get so close to they get kind of close to the truth here, pretty close, and then they just miss it altogether. But the fact that Inside the Magic, which is obviously a very much pro Walt Disney Company website, had written this piece, I found it a little stunning. Op-ed, cancel culture is killing Disney. And of course, got the frog in my throat right when I start reading this.
Hi-ho.
The controversial and problematic Splash Mountain is officially closed across Disney parks from Disneyland to Walt Disney World, while the film that inspired the ride, Song of the South, is arguably the true source of the ride's less than favorable reputation. Why is a decades-old attraction under so much scrutiny all at once? Cancel culture strikes again. Okay. We're not saying the ride wasn't showing its age and there's no getting around it, but it feels like the backlash for the attraction really didn't rear its ugly head until recently. In fact, sources even report the real reason for Splash Mountain and others like it falling out of favor is due to the actions of, quote, radical social justice groups. The question is it really all deserved? Despite Marvel and Star Wars' successful endeavors, now we can take issue with that. Obviously, Marvel had very successful endeavors for about 10 years or so up until 2019. Since then, it has been anything but successful when you consider what they're spending on making these things. Star Wars under Disney, not really been successful, let's be honest. Disney has been struggling with their image in the past 2 years. If they try to appease larger audiences by catering to a more general taste, they're crucified for not being more inclusive or having enough representation. If they try to appease the younger generation and appeal to more cultural norms, they're dragged through the mud to the refrain of go woke, go broke. It's a game they can't win. Okay. So they're already kind of hinting at, they're recognizing what the problem is. They just don't know how to fix it. Mm-hmm. While Splash Mountain's rethemed to Tiana's Bayou adventure with the cast of Princess and the Frog is seen by many as progress from Disney. Again, I don't know if I'd call it progress or just they're changing it. I don't know what the progress is from that standpoint. But okay, be that as it may, it might actually be doing more harm than good. Yes, the company should definitely strive to tell more diverse and inclusive stories, but there's a difference between inclusion, representation, and forced diversity. Now, this is amazing to me that the guys at ITM are actually pulling this out.
Well, it seems to me that reality has suddenly caught up with some of these websites, especially ones that you would never think would suffer from such. But this is what we've been saying for so long. The consequences are coming about exactly as we said they would. They are taking, and this is unprecedented, they've never done this before, they are taking an attraction, which in every single park in which it exists, it is at least in the top 3 most popular attractions they have. Mm-hmm. And they are changing that. I've got some exclusive news, by the way, on this that I'll be breaking tomorrow. I can't do it yet today, but it's going to make people, I think, a little bit even angry at Disney about how they're doing this. And I'll give you one thing that we've covered in the past that perhaps will do the same thing. When we're looking at the people who are redoing this ride and why they suck so badly, mm-hmm. we had a leak out from someone who was watching behind the scenes what was going on, and there was this really nutty individual working on the ride, right? They're part of the team. And just as you might suspect, they're young in their 20s. They are completely, totally, 1000% woke. And they were bragging and taking pleasure in destroying the animatronics, the skins, everything that came out of the Walt Disney World version of the ride. And you just have to think, you've got to be like fully inculcated in a cult to take joy in destroying, one of the most popular attractions and the props that are inside of it. Like that, you're warped in the head if you are so involved in this belief system that you feel like you have become a virtuous knight for doing so. But those are the people who are running this. And I think that now the industry and the media that covers the industry is looking at Disney and saying, you have too many nut jobs at your company. And mm-hmm. you are pulling the whole thing down. And Splash Mountain, if they don't do a fantastic job, I mean, they have to really knock it out of the park. If they don't do that, then they are stuck. They are saddled with an attraction that will sit there for 20 years and will be a reminder for decades that they failed. And the audience will let them know for 20 years.
It says the term cancel culture is thrown around quite liberally every time something is changed or removed. Granted, some pieces of popular culture have indeed been aged out of favor, and some changes absolutely demanded, but things being cut left and right due to what can be best described as audience sensitivities sets a very dangerous precedent for Disney and more. Again, very surprising language coming from ITM on this, to be honest with you. Splash Mountain is not Disney's first casualty in the wake of social justice movements, but it might be one of the biggest. Thus far, we've seen Disney legends like Johnny Depp lose their entire careers. Won't go down that road. We all know why. Historic pieces of the Disney parks being gutted and replaced. She lied. And Oscar-winning songs removed to satisfy one particular audience, and it's starting to wear and tear on the studio.
That's something that the average person doesn't know, too, Valiant. The average person does not know that Zippity Doo-Dah, a song that has been sung by vast numbers of the most famous African Americans of all time, that song has been struck from the parks now. It's no longer allowed to be played.
Yes,
exactly. And we see the booklet you have there. Hang on, let me put you in the full mode.
That's not a booklet.
What do you got? I can't solo you right now. You'll have to put yourself on the solo so we can see you better.
That's the original 33.
It's the record. Yeah, the record.
Wow. That's the original 33.
Gotcha.
That was my dad.
But the individual you're looking at there, that's James Baskett. And when I had the incredible fortune of interviewing Valerie Stewart, the last remaining person who had memory of making Song of the South, because she's Nick Stewart's daughter, she's passed away now, so that voice is gone. But she said James Baskett passed away of a broken heart. And that was because the way that this film was treated over the years. And then her father, of course, was exceedingly happy to come back and get to play the role of Brer Bear when they opened the Disneyland attraction. His voice is now silent. He is probably the father of all Black voice actors in the world. He is the guy who broke into voice acting as an African-American, a trailblazer. And you can't hear his voice anymore in any of their parks because of their decisions.
And Walt was the one who brought him in.
So what is it about? Because I've heard so much about Splash Mountain. What is it about Splash Mountain? I've never ridden the ride that's so controversial.
It's not the ride. There's nothing controversial about Splash Mountain.
It's the Song of the South in general.
Yeah.
It's people have the issue.
It's what I just held up. It's this because by modern audience standards, modern audiences, right? Which, let's be honest, are frankly, I'm sorry, some of the least educated historically about history, I should say.
Oh, absolutely.
There has ever been. This was never meant, like, Disney did not make this movie to make fun of a race of people or ethnicity. It was about bringing, and Lorena, I wish she was still here, but she's talked about this at length as well. This was an actual authentic legendary African folklore tale. Was Song of the South. That's what it was based on. And those, it was legitimate, like, real African American culture. And Walt decided to really go out on a limb and make that movie because that was at a time when Hollywood did not invite actors
and make a black man the lead actor in a movie for children.
Exactly. Hollywood did not do that at that point.
It was as risky as him making Snow White, and people don't know that. And he did that out of a moral decision in his heart that he was going to make a film with a male black actor as the lead in a children's movie. And I mean, the risk he took was insane. At the time that it came out, though, I believe it had the 4th or 5th highest box office of all time.
Yeah.
It did exceedingly well.
It did. And his own daughter, as you mentioned, who you interviewed, Miss Valerie Stewart, was very taken aback and upset by Disney making this decision. It was a dishonor to her father and his legacy.
Well, and Iger, you got to remember this film was available all the way from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And Iger is the one who decided that it wasn't going to be shown anymore. And Iger is the one who decided that it would essentially be put in the forever vault. And largely that has to do with a very long feud between the NAACP and Disney regarding this film. When this film was in development, this goes really in the weeds, but when this film was in development back in the 40s, the NAACP wanted to have creative control over the film in order to support it. And Walt Disney said no. that he was not going to give them creative control. That was a step too far. And as a result, they boycotted it. And so then that was brought back by Iger in the 90s. And he said, of all the films, that one didn't deserve to even be viewed. And so here we are now.
Now, I was just going to say, okay, this is an interesting article, and the fact that they're trying to see both sides of that, but it's almost a little bit, a little too late, because yes, they have bowed to a lot to basically these ferocious voices that scream aloud. They may be, a tiny little group, but what is it? The squeaky wheel gets the oil or whatever. The louder you scream, the more attention you're given. But by their own actions, they are perpetrating this. Yeah. They are doing it themselves. So they have put themselves in this pickle.
Oh, yes.
They have given themselves this problem.
That's it.
I don't know that I even sympathize with it anymore.
They sacrificed Splash Mountain during the 2020 summer when all that was going on. And this really wasn't a big deal at all. Splash Mountain was, how many decades have we been where people were getting on this ride and getting off and nobody went, oh, you're a terrible person. You rose. No, it's got 2-hour waits. But Disney was looking for a way to ensure that they were not boycotted as part of that process that was going on in the summer of 2020. And so they needed to make a virtue signal. They did not want their very brand new Disney Plus to be potentially boycotted and them blamed for being anything, untoward to certain groups. And so their virtue signal was, we'll get rid of Splash Mountain. And so Splash Mountain is a victim of that situation. And now we're stuck with whatever this hand-me-down is attraction we're going to get.
Yeah. And the article kind of even goes on to semi-realize that. You see in the next paragraph, what happened with Strange World when Disney tries to please a vocal minority, and Strange World just literally died on the vine the minute it opened in theaters. But they say, however, the problem isn't Disney trying to please all of the people all of the time, but rather a fear of coming off as controversial. I don't believe that. I think Disney knows darn well what they're doing. They're promoting and they are sponsoring and spending millions, tens of millions of dollars on certain political issues, socio-political issues we've covered here ad nauseum. I won't go into again, but they don't seem to have that problem. The problem is, I think Disney is trying to figure out now, how do we keep going down the path that we want to go down and drag the audience kicking and screaming with us, whether they want to or not? Where's all the money going, right? That's what they're trying to figure out. And I think this is part of what this article is lamenting. Disney is not getting their way anymore. They're not able to run roughshod over the American audience like they once did. And by that, they used to give the American audience a good product that the largesse of everybody wanted to go see. Now they're trying to target. They're still trying to spend $200 and $250 million on these budgets for these movies, generating these kind of products, and they're not working. Like, they do not know how to measure how much we spend versus the audience size that we think we can actually elicit favorably to come see this and pay money for it. They're not there yet. And that's going to go into the article from Fortune magazine that we're about to hop onto after this. But you look here, because of this school of thinking, the balancing act and, trying to avoid, confrontation and audience division and blah, blah, blah. And they continue to go on through this article lamenting with this. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? While Disney has at least attempted to be more inclusive with casting, scripts, and more, it's not happening in organic fashion. That's true. And good 100%. On ITM for recognizing that, because that's the problem. They're not doing it in organic fashion. People immediately recognize, no, you have a DEI initiative that you state in all of your financial reports, your annual stockholder meetings, and you have a chart that goes up. We need to hire, okay, we're going to do this movie, but we need to make sure that we have this, and this in the cast, and then go from there. Story comes second, right? And this is the inorganic fashion that they're kind of referring to. As successful as the remake of The Little Mermaid is, it's a passing fancy. Okay, first of all, it's not successful. Let's be very blunt. We've covered this earlier. This is a disaster for Disney. There's nothing successful about this remake, apart from maybe some people liked it, and that's fine, but that doesn't mean it's successful in the sense when we talk about a business initiative. It is not successful in the sense that it is going to make money. This movie is going to cost Disney over 100, maybe as high as $150 million in losses to have put this thing into theaters. That should not happen. Yes, they're going to sell some toys. Is there going to be any significant increase in classic Ariel toy sales because of this movie? Probably not, because that's not what they're pushing. They're pushing the new brand of Ariel. Is there going to be any significant sales of downloads for the soundtrack? Probably not, as we can see, because what is everybody doing? They're making fun of the new soundtrack. Just go hang on the old one you've already got that everybody already has. Like Tom's super chat earlier, $1 billion in VHS sales, $300 million in disc physical media sales, DVDs and Blu-rays up to this point, and 4K, which I have over here. The 4K of Little Mermaid is over there.
Yeah, and how much money in like sales for little girls' T-shirts and toys and all the other stuff.
Yeah, and look what they say. It's a passing fancy that just won't be as culturally significant. And they're saying even though they think this movie's successful, it's a passing fancy that just won't be as culturally significant as the original. True, nowhere near. Disney isn't thinking long term, and that is precisely the problem. Again, I cannot believe I'm reading this from Inside the Magic, and I want to give them credit.
What's your fancy financial term when we don't just look at how poorly something is done in terms of losses or profit, et cetera, but when we look at the potential lost? If you think about what this movie could have done, if they had just gotten out of their own way, it would have made $1 billion in the box office, but the merchandising is surely worth more. So what do you think the overall loss is from the potential that they had?
Well, I mean, I believe you're referring to the old expression of the economic opportunity cost.
Exactly.
So when you talk about economic opportunity cost, as Pro just mentioned, it's not just what you lost on paper, it's what you could have had if you had done something different. That's economic opportunity cost. The economic opportunity cost of this movie,
oh, it's huge.
Probably at least $1 billion. And I'm not talking grosses in the theater. I'm talking net to Disney.
Wow.
I'm talking between the toy sales, more soundtracks they could have sold if they had not tampered with the original.
That's Hulu buying money, baby.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly. And that's the other problem is they have to look at buying Hulu here in about 6 to 8 months, and they don't have the capital right now for it. They're going to have to lever up hard, meaning they're going to have to go borrow billions, tens of billions of dollars to do that, and they already have too much leverage as it is from the Fox deal from a few years ago.